The news broke on a Thursday. Defense World ran the headline first. Carrington Air Seas defense contract voided amid authentication failure. The story spread like a virus. By noon, it was on Reuters. By 5, CNN was running a live segment with a panel of analysts wondering how a billion-dollar company could get outmaneuvered by its own tech. I didn't do interviews, didn't return calls, but I did one thing that morning. I wrote a message. It wasn't an email, not a press release, just a plain text file I saved on the same drive that still housed Gateway Final. It was titled legacy.log. It said exactly what I needed it to. This system was built for integrity, not revenge, not sabotage. If you're reading this, it means you bypassed me instead of working with me, and it means you lost. You called it instinctual. You called it luck. But you never understood the architecture. You never asked why there were 7 layers, or why the final gate required biometric, machine ID, and original command line validation. You thought you could clone a future without acknowledging the hands that built it. You were wrong. Yarb, ernd, ZT. I didn't send it to anyone. I just left it there, tucked where only someone desperate enough would find it, like an echo or a warning. That was 6 months ago. Since then, Carrington stock kept slipping. The government issued a full audit. The Defense Department announced they were reassessing all partnerships with private aerospace firms, which everyone knew meant they were done. Tyler, last I heard, he was pursuing other opportunities. Translation, blacklisted. Paul Carrington never apologized, never reached out. But Miriam told me, off the record, that his legal team kept circling back to that biometric clause like moths to a light. They knew. They just couldn't say it out loud. As for me, I didn't vanish. I built again. Smaller this time. Cleaner. 2 old field engineers from the Reno days joined me. We called it Sky Anchor. Quiet projects, deep protocol work, only with people who understood trust isn't just a word in a press kit. Sometimes I'd get messages from former colleagues. Should have seen your face when Tyler said leadership shift. Still talk about that moment. Or from Jacob. Gateway Final was art. They still don't get how you lace the signature trail. I never replied. I didn't need to. Because the system I built didn't need me anymore. Not directly. It just needed one thing they never gave me, respect. And if they never learn that, well, then the gate stays locked. Forever. I walked back to my desk like I was just another guy who got laid off. No press release, no thank you speech, no handshake, just silence. The hallway smelled like lemon disinfectant and burnt coffee, same as always, but it all felt different now. Off, like I had walked into a simulation, glitching one frame at a time. My name was already gone from the glass. In its place, fresh white vinyl letters spelled out Tyler Carrington, Director, Defense Futures. He hadn't even changed the chair. I saw the armrest I'd broken and re-glued last fall. Same view, same scuff marks on the wall from my bag. The only thing that didn't belong was him. The same guys I used to grab beers with? Heads down. Not one person looked up. Not Alex from RF Systems, who'd crashed in my hotel room in Montreal. Not Serena, who once cried in my office after a missed promotion. They all kept their eyes on their screens like I was a stranger passing through the wrong building. And there it was, by my desk, like a bad sitcom, a cardboard box. No label, no note, just left like the building had ejected me through some bureaucratic reflex. It wasn't even mine. I could tell by the brand. The office manager probably pulled it out of storage and dropped it there, like it was just another task between filing invoices. I didn't bother filling it. I didn't need the junk. I took the few things that mattered. The old leather notebook I'd carried since Buenos Aires. Corners torn. My handwriting barely legible by page 10. A framed photo of my first field team. Mid-briefing, all grins and coffee cups. We were exhausted. We were proud. The ceramic mug from the Reno conference. Black with a chipped rim. The one I drank from during every single late-night status call with Aerospace Division's legal. Everything else, let it rot. I sat down one last time, logged in. No one said a word. Even my account hadn't been fully killed yet. Rookie mistake on IT's part. The system still thought I had access, so it let me in. I closed out my email, wiped my drive, cleared my local sinks, detached my signal traces from the mainframe. Every personal line of code gone except one gateway final. I buried it deep, buried like a mine, not a secret. It looked like a shell script on the surface, a neat little routine labeled with standard ops jargon, just enough to lull anyone into thinking it was background automation. But under it, a cascade of trigger protocols. Nothing flashy. No viruses, just conditions, one voice, one machine, one location. Mine. See, Tyler didn't know this, but the final authorization for the payment wasn't in the cloud. It wasn't even inside the Carrington Heirs' infrastructure. It was local, old school. The last signal pulse, payment launch, contract delivery, full execution confirmation required biometric verification from the very terminal I had built the deal on. My voice, my fingerprints, my MAC address, my war room. The company had spent 9 months with me, building a firewall no one could breach. They just forgot to ask who had the last key. I sat there and watched the cursor blink. Not flashing, not waiting, just blinking like it was alive. I didn't say a word. I didn't make a scene, no speeches, no slamming drawers. I just left the trap intact and stood up. They didn't even know it was there. They erased my name from the directory. They wiped me off the org chart. They replaced the plaque on the door. But they missed the one line of code they never understood. And that line? It was waiting. I walked out of the building with my box tucked under one arm. No fanfare, no stairs. Just that weird humming sound the elevators always made when you were the only one riding them at midday. It was raining by the time I hit the sidewalk. Fitting. The kind of drizzle that soaks your collar and makes the city smell like wet metal. I looked back once, just once. Top floor, corner window. My old office. The lights were on. Tyler was in there, probably trying to figure out why the system still hadn't finalized. Probably sipping from the Reno mug like it was his. Let him. The war was already over. He just didn't know it yet. The next morning, I woke up to my phone buzzing with alerts like it owed someone money. LinkedIn, Google, alerts, Twitter. All lit up with the same words. Tyler Carrington leads record defense deal for Carrington Heirs. There it was. A photo. Him in a charcoal gray suit, standing in front of the Carrington logo like he'd grown it in a petri dish. Hair slicked back, arms folded. The headline made it sound like he'd brokered peace in the Middle East. I clicked the article. A major milestone for Carrington Heirs as Tyler Carrington, newly appointed Director of Defense Futures, finalizes a groundbreaking $92 million aerospace contract. Sources close to the deal cite Tyler's decisive leadership and instinctual grasp of emerging threats as keys to success. Instinctual, that's what they called it. I called it showing up 7 months late to a party and stealing the birthday cake. He couldn't even pronounce the client's name right. I watched the clip from a defense tech conference where he gave an interview. The host said something about scalable threat response, and Tyler launched into a monologue about high-velocity procurement loops, which wasn't a thing. He used every buzzword but forgot the actual payload specs. And there it was again. My work, my data, my timeline. His name. I watched him sit in my old chair. I saw my mug in his hand, the one from Reno. I'd taken it home just 2 days earlier. Somehow, he had a new one made to look exactly the same, down to the chipped rim. I had spent 17 midnight calls on that deal, 10 months of legal traps and counteroffers. We rebuilt a third of the framework after the DTI compliance hit back in November. He showed up after it was done, after the contracts were in review. He hadn't written a single line of code, hadn't attended a single vendor review, and now the whole world thought he had pulled it off from scratch. Then my inbox pinged. Marcus, client team. This feels off. You okay? Marcus. Good guy. Procurement lead on the client side. We'd burned through 3 time zones together trying to get cross-border clearance for the satellite integration. He knew, maybe not everything, but enough. I stared at the message for a while. Did I feel okay? Not really, but I wasn't done watching yet. I didn't respond. I left it on read. Because something in me wanted to see how far they were willing to go before the system reminded them who built it. They gave Tyler my chair, my team, my mug. But what they didn't know, what they never even thought to check, was that the system underneath it still had my voice as the key. Gateway Final was still armed. The payment hadn't gone through, not fully. All they had was a press tour and a LinkedIn headline. The lock was still waiting. And Tyler, he had no idea he was sitting on a bomb with the timer frozen mid-count. By lunch, the LinkedIn comments were full of congratulations. Visionary leadership. Impressive win for the next generation. Even a nod from someone at the Department of Commerce. I recognized 3 people who had never even replied to my deal briefings. Now they were tagging him like he was royalty. I closed the laptop. Poured myself a glass of water. I didn't throw anything. Didn't scream. Didn't even mutter a curse. I just looked at the wall and thought, let them have their parade, because eventually they'd need to cross the finish line. And when they reached for the baton, all they'd find was static, my chair, my contract, my code, and one voice the system would still accept. Mine. The call came in just after 10. Unknown number. I let it go the first time, but it came again 30 seconds later. Same number. That kind of persistence only meant one thing. I answered. Zach, it's Jacob, from InfoSec. I knew the voice immediately. Young guy, always sharp, always 2 steps ahead of the middle managers. I once covered for him when he botched a patch deployment that took down half of DevNet for 4 hours. He never forgot it. You okay? I asked, already guessing he wasn't. There was a pause, just long enough to confirm it. Quick question, he said. Did you code biometric lockouts into Gateway Final? I leaned back in my chair, staring at nothing. Yeah, I said slowly. Why? Because Tyler's trying to finalize the payment authorization, and the system won't accept him. I didn't say anything at first. I wanted to hear how far this had gone. Jacob continued. It's bouncing back the final confirmation, hash. Biometric fail, location, mismatch. He's tried twice. He brought in Brent, too. And he ran a secondary check on the logs. System's clean. No bugs, just locked. Because it needs my voice, I said, and my workstation. Another pause. Longer this time. They're freaking out, he said finally. I was told not to call you. Paul said this was internal. I almost laughed. Of course he did. I'm supposed to reset it, Jacob said. No, don't do that. He went quiet. If you reset it, I continued, it'll corrupt the audit trail. And if the audit trail's compromised, the contract becomes unenforceable under Clause 9.6. I know, he said. That's what I told them. Paul didn't like it. He never read Clause 9.6. Jacob gave a half laugh, then caught himself. Tyler's red in the face. Paul just kept saying, it worked for Zach, so it should work for us. It doesn't work like that, I said. No one ever listened when I explained that Gateway Final wasn't just a digital handshake. It was a lockbox with 3 keys, biometric, terminal ID, and geofence proximity. All 3 had to match what was imprinted on the origin instance. That meant my fingerprints, my voice print, and the same workstation where the build was compiled. Not a clone, not a proxy. The original. They thought it was just a fancy command line wrapper, but it was a signature, a vault. And they weren't on the guest list. They said this wasn't about you, Jacob said, his voice dropping lower, that it's just a protocol misalignment. But Zach, this whole thing is built around your confirmation hash. Without it, they've got nothing. I rubbed my jaw, feeling the edge of a grin creep in. I wasn't happy exactly, but I wasn't sorry either. They thought I was being difficult when I put in all those redundancies, I said. Jacob didn't respond. He didn't have to. They thought I was protecting the company, I added. I was. And now I was the threat. Not because I wanted to be, but because I was the only one the system would trust. Jacob lowered his voice again. What do I do if they tell me to override it? You tell them what happens if you do, and then you walk. He let out a breath. Yeah, that's what I thought. I could tell he was weighing it. His future, his loyalty, his job. But he was sharp. He understood the real problem wasn't technical. It was human. They had replaced the wrong part of the system. Me. "They'll call you next," Jacob said. "Or someone will." I didn't say anything. I was already staring at the screen on my laptop, where the backup log for Gateway Finals still blinked green, clean, untouched, waiting. "They really thought I was bluffing," I said quietly. "They thought you were just code," Jacob said. I hung up, and somewhere, back at Carrington Airsys HQ, I imagined Paul standing behind Tyler's chair, arms folded, watching his nephew try to brute force a vault that would never open. They could throw every override command they had. They could swap servers, clone drives, escalate permissions, even bring in outside consultants. But the system wasn't confused. It knew exactly what it was doing. And all it kept saying was, "Access denied." I wasn't planning to watch the live stream. I had deleted the press release the moment it landed in my inbox. Carrington Airsys to unveil next-gen defense roadmap with leadership showcase. I knew exactly what that meant. More lies dressed up in buzzwords. But curiosity's a stubborn thing. At 9:58 a.m., I opened the stream. There they were. Paul Carrington stood behind a polished podium on the same conference stage we'd used last year to announce the joint prototype. This time, he looked more like a senator than a CEO. Navy suit, soft lighting, a stage banner behind him that read, "Redefining Aerospace, Sky Pulse, and Beyond." Sky Pulse. I almost spit out my coffee. That wasn't the name of the project. We'd codenamed it Tantalus. Sky Pulse was the internal branding team's suggestion from 4 months ago, one we all rejected because it sounded like a vitamin supplement. But now, here it was, trademarked, rebranded, and sanitized for the shareholders. Paul launched into his speech like he was running for office. With this milestone, Carrington Airsys demonstrates not only our technological leadership, but our capacity to evolve with agility. Today, I'm proud to present the architect of this historic deal, our Director of Defense Futures, Tyler Carrington. The audience clapped. Or maybe it was piped-in applause. Hard to tell. Tyler walked out like he owned the damn place. Slim gray suit, no tie, top button undone, trying for that effortless innovator look. He gave a little nod to the crowd and smiled into the camera like he'd practiced it in front of a mirror all week. "I want to thank the team," he began, "for trusting my vision from the start. Sky Pulse was never just about contracts. It was about rethinking the way we build, defend, and adapt." Adapt? The only thing he'd adapted to was my chair, he went on, tossing around terms he barely understood. Compliance streamlining, quantum bandwidth prep, predictive battlefield interfacing. Half of it didn't mean anything. The other half was lifted from the original deck I built with our legal and systems teams 6 months ago. Then he said it. "This has been a masterclass in adaptive thinking." I choked on my coffee. The same guy who didn't know what a cross-border compliance clause was 2 weeks ago was now calling himself the teacher. He didn't mention my name, not once. Not the team behind the architecture. Not the procurement nightmare we survived with the South Korea subvendor. Not the all-nighter we pulled in DC to fix the NATO encryption issue. He just smiled and called it instinct. And there in the crowd, third row, stage left, I saw her, Lila. She used to run procurement with me back in the early days of Defense Futures. She was the one who flagged the dual sourcing loophole that saved us from a potential audit last year. We'd fought through so many fires together, we joked about writing a disaster memoir called Clause 12.4 and Other Nightmares. She was dabbing the corner of her eye, one tear, barely visible, but I knew what it meant. She remembered. The camera didn't catch her, the press didn't care, but I saw it, that single moment of quiet honesty in a room built on performance. Paul closed out the event with a few more lines about resilience and turning the page. Tyler posed for photos. A few junior execs clapped a little too hard. The feed faded to a polished graphic. Carrington Airsys, engineering the future. And I sat there in my kitchen, alone with an empty coffee cup, watching them try to sell a future they hadn't even unlocked yet. Because what none of them seemed to realize was simple. The show was pretty. The slide deck was impressive. But the gate was still locked in the past, and it needed me to open. I stared at Marcus's message for a full 5 minutes before typing anything. The cursor blinked in the chat box like it had an opinion. I kept it short. Me, check page 38. Bottom line. That was all I said. I knew he'd find it. I knew exactly what was there, because I had written it into the contract language myself, in small print, just beneath the compliance terms. A single sentence. Biometric confirmation required from origin system to authorize final disbursement. 10 minutes later, Marcus replied, "Marcus, what does this mean? We're halting until we get answers." I leaned back in my chair and exhaled. He didn't know. They hadn't told him I was gone. They hadn't told anyone. Carrington Airsis had ghosted the guy responsible for managing the contract on the client side and tried to pass off a shiny-haired nephew as the brains behind the operation, and now it was catching up to them. I opened the document logs out of habit. My local backup still mirrored the final PDF, time-stamped and signed, except the version on my mirror didn't match the one currently listed in the public index. New formatting. New margins. A different footer layout. Date stamps bumped ahead by 3 days. They'd edited the file. That wasn't just careless. That was breach-level behavior. I checked deeper. Whoever had done the edits wasn't even smart about it. The metadata still showed the original author CD, T. Carrington, us author. Not even a scrub. They were trying to cover the system mismatch by pushing through a new version of the deliverable, one that didn't require my biometric check. But the internal hash still pointed back to the original contract, which meant Tyler had submitted a falsified closing document to a federal defense client. And Marcus? Marcus wasn't just mad anymore. He was digging. He called me next. I didn't answer, just let it ring out. A text came in 5 minutes later. "Zach, I need a straight answer. Did you get pushed out?" Still, I didn't reply. Not yet. I wasn't protecting them, but I wasn't saving anyone either. Let the truth unfold at its own pace. Because now the client knew something was off. The paper trail had fingerprints all over it, and none of them were mine. That was the tell. The funny thing? All Carrington Airsis had to do was be honest. If they had reached out, if Paul had called me, if Tyler had kept his mouth shut instead of playing rock star, this could have been handled cleanly. Quietly. Instead, they tried to rewrite history and delete the guy who built the system, and now the client realized the whole deal might be invalid without my sign-off. No voice print, no payment, no payment, no project, no project, no contract. And now that Marcus was looking, he wasn't going to stop until he got the whole picture. At exactly 9:12 a.m., the system log blinked red for the 4th time that week. Access denied. Again. Tyler tried to finalize the payment from the command suite they'd built to look like a war room. Custom monitors, glass whiteboards, a fake sense of urgency. None of it mattered, because the cursor just blinked back at him, waiting for something it wasn't going to get. I didn't see it live, but Jacob sent me the internal screen grab. Tyler hunched forward, tapping the enter key like pressure would fix it. Paul pacing behind him, jaw clenched. Brent from IT standing by, arms crossed, already sweating through his shirt. Jacob's message came in 1 minute later. "They're drowning?" I took a sip of coffee and opened the backup log. The call had gone out at 9:03. Authorized payment for Sky Pulse final delivery. But Gateway Final wasn't having it. Brent had stepped in at 9:09. "Needs original machine," he said. "Mac ID doesn't match. Voice print invalid." Paul didn't get it. "Just override it." Brent looked like he wished he were somewhere else. We'd have to destroy the contract log to bypass the lock. And if we do that, Brent said, voice flat, we void the whole agreement. Gateway Final is the delivery mechanism. Kill the logs and we have no proof of execution. That's a breach. It got quiet in the room after that. Word started to spread across Slack within minutes. I wasn't in the company workspace anymore, obviously, but Jacob still had access. He sent me screenshots. War Room Brent. "We need legal now." Tyler, "Just get around it." Brent, It's not a printer jam, man. It's biometric locked. It's like Fort Knox with a sarcasm problem. Paul, delete this thread. But it was already too late. Marketing was spinning. PR was scrambling. The press contacts who had gotten the exclusive on Sky Pulse were now hearing whispers that the system wasn't functioning. And the payment, still pending. I watched the logs update in real time. The system wasn't crashing. It was running perfectly, doing exactly what I'd built it to do. It needed a match it would only get from my voice, from my terminal, from the real architect. I leaned back and let the silence play out. Sometimes the loudest thing in the room is the sound of nothing working. At 9:47, Jacob sent one more message. Brent just said they might have to call you. I didn't reply. Let them squirm, let them fumble and sweat under stage lights and buzzwords. Let them realize this wasn't a bug, this was the design. They thought they could bury me under a new job title. They thought a new logo would hide the foundation. But this contract? It wasn't built on confidence. It was built on fingerprints. Mine. The meeting was set for 1 p.m. at Miriam's law office. Neutral ground. I got there 10 minutes early. The receptionist didn't even ask who I was, just nodded and pointed me to the glass conference room at the end of the hall. I could see the skyline from there. Everything looked calm. I sat down and waited. Paul arrived at 1:07. No entourage, no lawyer, just him. He looked like he hadn't slept in a week. Tie loosened, collar wrinkled, gray hair not combed for the cameras this time. It was the first time I'd seen him without the performance mask. "Zach," he said, like we were just old friends catching up. "Appreciate you making time." I didn't respond, just pushed a manila folder across the table. His fingers hesitated a second before he picked it up. Inside was everything he didn't want to see. Code rights documentation, chain of custody records, timestamp logs. The original biometric lock clause, signed by the now retired CTO. A notarized copy of the internal memo, where I requested permanent execution authority. He'd initialed it himself. He flipped through the pages like he might find a trapdoor in them. "You're the only one who can trigger the contract," he finally said. "No kidding." He gave a weak smile. "Look, we've had a rough couple of days. Miscommunication, bad assumptions. I think we both know how fast things move." "You mean how fast people get replaced?" I said. He didn't argue. There was a long silence. Then, with that same practiced corporate tone he always used in boardrooms, he leaned forward. "What'll it take?" That was the part I'd been waiting for. Not to hear him ask, but to realize I didn't want what he thought I did. This wasn't about payback. It wasn't about proving a point or clawing my way back to the chair they ripped out from under me. It was about the fact that I had already walked away. And the foundation they tried to build without me, it was collapsing in real time. I stood up, slow and calm. "You wanted a future without me," I said. "Now you've got it." His eyes dropped to the folder, like it might rewrite itself if he stared long enough. "I'm not here to negotiate," I added. "I'm not your failsafe. You made your choices." "You could fix this," he said, more desperate now. "We can bring you in under a different title, consultant, senior strategist, whatever you want. No one needs to know." I reached for the door, too late for that. He didn't stop me. I walked out of the room and down the hallway without looking back. The air outside was hot and dry, and the sun bounced off the sidewalk like it had something to prove. I took a long breath and kept walking. Let the cracks talk now. They'd do a better job than I ever could. I was halfway through my second cup of black coffee when the headline dropped. Aerotech terminates $92 contract with Carrington Aircy subhead. Cites protocol mismanagement, security discrepancies, and unresolved access failures. I didn't blink, just scrolled. The statement was short, corporate sterile. A few keywords stood out like bruises. Loss of confidence, breach of protocol, non-compliant execution logs. But I knew what it really meant. The contract was dead. I clicked through to the market summary. Carrington Air's stock was down 8% before noon. Not catastrophic, but enough to rattle the board. Enough to get people whispering behind closed doors. They issued their own release by midday. After internal review, Carrington Air's acknowledges execution irregularities tied to the Sky Pulse project. Effective immediately, Director Tyler Carrington is being placed on administrative leave pending review. Administrative leave. That's what they say when the boots are halfway off, but they haven't figured out how to spin it yet. I didn't smile, didn't gloat. That wasn't what this was about. Jacob forwarded me a leak from internal Slack. Someone had screen capped the error logs. They'd been passed around like wildfire. Gateway final error log. Access denied. Execution source unauthorized. Trace route blocked. Origin mismatch detected. Some junior staffer had added a caption under the screenshot. Built a mansion, forgot the keys. A thread of emails came next. Someone from legal asking if Tyler had ever been granted biometric override rights. Another asking why the contract hadn't been updated when I was removed. Then the kicker, an IT manager asking if it was too late to call Zach. Yeah, it was. At 12:41 p.m., Marcus called me. I didn't answer. He texted instead, "They're blaming everything on an internal audit breakdown. We both know what that means." Yes, we did. Someone somewhere had tried to rewrite the origin point of the project, to cut the builder out of the frame, but digital fingerprints don't lie, and Gateway Final was built to remember everything, even when people wanted to forget. Back at the cafe, the barista refilled my cup without asking. She'd seen me there enough times. I nodded my thanks and watched a mother across the room help her kid with a juice box. The world was still turning. No press showed up, no dramatic headlines with my name in them. I wasn't trending. No one sent flowers. No one apologized. And I didn't need them to. The truth had done the work for me. They thought replacing me was cheaper. But turns out, erasing the architect destroys the whole damn house.